Employment agreement. Written contract to establish independent contractor status. When a broker hires an agent in California, an employment agreement is necessary so as to properly establish the agent as an independent contractor. This means that a 1099 statement has to be produced by the employing broker for his or her agents, parentheses, called associate licensees, end parentheses, so that the agents can file taxes. Real estate agents fall under a special category of independent contractor, which remains valid. In general, the IRS does not like the status of independent contractor because taxes are not withheld by the employer of an independent contractor. Since the IRS is in the business of collecting money for the country in the form of taxes, an, quote, employee, end quote, status is more preferable to them because an employer is required to withhold taxes and send them directly to the IRS, making it more likely that the government will get their tax revenue. True independent status means that the employing broker does not direct the actions of the agent or set his or her work hours or specific duties. An employment agreement is a written contract between employing broker and the agent, parentheses, associate licensee, end parentheses, to properly establish independent contractor status. Cooperating broker. Agent who helps another by bringing a buyer. Agents or associate licensees, parentheses, who hang their license with brokers, end parentheses, earn a commission as part of a real estate transaction. Since sellers and buyers have different motivations, we have a seller's agent and a buyer's agent, parentheses. A single agent can represent both. This is called a dual agent, and a disclosure is required because of the potentially conflicting needs of the two parties, end parentheses. The cooperating broker is a special name for an agent who helps another seller's agent, parentheses, also called the listing agent, end parentheses, by bringing a buyer. A cooperating broker may therefore represent either the seller or the buyer as defined by the actions of the cooperating broker. The word cooperating is used because the MLS, parentheses, multiple listing service, end parentheses, is a cooperative listing of properties by brokers, parentheses, and the agents or associate licensees who work under them, end parentheses. The cooperating broker owes a fiduciary responsibility to whomever she represents, the seller or the buyer. There is an additional complication here that a, quote, sub-agent, end quote, which has to be agreed to in writing by the seller. A cooperating broker is an agent who helps a seller's agent by bringing a buyer. Related words: employing broker, associate licensee, sub-agent. Police power. Legal theory: government has power to build society. Police power is a legal theory that the government or the state has the right and responsibility to promote a safe, effective, and orderly society through managing its citizens' safely, health, and morals. Safety, health, and morals. For the theory of police power, we get the general plan, zoning, eminent domain, building codes, health codes, etc. There are limits, however, and police power does not give the state the right to abuse its populace. The balance between the two is based on the calm and thoughtful administration of power. Police power is the legal theory that the government has the authority to make rules to protect society. Related words: eminent domain, condemnation, inverse condemnation. Estate in reversion. Estate held by grantor or the giver of a life estate. An estate is the ownership interest or claim that a person has in real property. There are two types of overall estates: freehold estates and less than freehold estates. Freehold estates are owned, and less than freehold estates are rented or leased. There are two types of freehold estates: estate in fee and a life estate. A life estate is based on the life of a specific person. A dad grants a real property to his daughter for as long as mom is still alive, at which time he wants the property back. The dad is the grantor, the daughter is the life tenant. The type of estate the dad continues to hold is an estate in reversion. An estate in reversion is the estate held by the grantor who has granted a life estate to someone else. Related words: life estate. Resident manager, apartment manager who lives in one of the units. In California, an apartment building with more than 15 units requires a, quote, resident manager, end quote. A resident manager is a person who lives in one of the units and manages the other units. Managing typically consists of finding new tenants, showing apartments for lease, signing leases, collecting deposits, collecting rents, making sure all is in order when tenants leave, and acting as a reference for prior tenants of the property. Resident managers will often receive some sort of compensation for their work, which might be pay, free rent, or both. A resident manager does not need a real estate license in California, but works under the direction of a real estate broker, parentheses, acting in the capacity of a property manager, end parentheses, who is licensed. A property manager does not live on site. A resident manager does. A resident manager is an apartment manager who lives in one of the units. Life estate. Estate of a duration set by a person's life. A life estate is the right to hold a property based on the length of a person's life. Whose life depends on what is specified by the person granting, parentheses called the grantor, the life estate. A brother gives his sister a property with a life estate based on her life. The property reverts back to the brother upon the sister's death. A brother gives his sister a property with a life estate based on the life of their father. The property reverts to the brother upon the death of the father. A life estate is a limitation on a freehold estate. A life estate is an estate of duration set by a person's life. Related words: estate, freehold estate. Immovable by law, when it is against the law to move an item. Real property is said to be land, anything permanently attached to land, anything appurtenant to land, or anything immovable by law. The idea that something is immovable by law covers the concept that while an item may be removable, now we have laws that take over to ensure the item remains real property and does not become personal property, which is anything that isn't real property. Some examples might include a chandelier, which is attached to the home. Fixtures are considered attached to the property. A tree, for example, is attached to the land, and it would have to be cut down to be removed. The fact that the item is destroyed in the moving process is a good indication that it is immovable by law. So this would apply to buildings, houses, and structures too. Immovable by law is an item which could be removed, but doing so is illegal. Principle of highest and best use. Most economically valuable use of a property. The principle of highest and best use is the idea that a property is being used to its highest capacity to provide value economically. That is why the principle of highest and best use is the principle behind appraising the market value of real property. If the property is not being used to its highest and best use, then what would the property be worth if it was? Property managers work to use properties to their highest and best use. Economic obsolescence. Property value declined due to changes in the environment. Property value can lose value for any number of reasons. Two of the reasons are functional obsolescence and economic obsolescence. Economic obsolescence means that because of an economic change, the value of the property has declined. The classic example might be the, quote, buggy whip, end quote. There is a famous statement in business, quote, there will always be a market for a good buggy whip, end quote. Of course, we know now that no more, quote, buggy whips, end quote, are sold these days because we drive cars instead of using horse-drawn carriages. So the economy moved on to the automobiles, and therefore buggy whips went through a process of economic obsolescence. An equivalent example in real estate is the trend to move manufacturing overseas. Factory properties will experience a decline in value because they are not needed as much. The change happened externally to the factory property, but the decline in value is very real. Economic obsolescence is a change outside of the property that results in a reduction in the value of the property. Synonyms: external obsolescence. Antonyms: functional obsolescence or internal obsolescence. Related words: appraisal. Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, of 1974. Federal law requires fairness in providing credit. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, ECOA, is a federal law which requires fairness in providing credit. ECOA restricts the use of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, or age in the evaluation of whether to give credit or not. Appropriate and equally applied considerations like income, expenses, debt, credit history, and credit worthiness are fine to use to evaluate whether to extend credit or not. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 is a federal law which requires fairness in proving credit. Related words: Truth in Lending Act, TILA, Regulation Z, Consumer Credit Protection Act of 1968, Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, FACTA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA.